came in actually from it was Roger Busby had asked. Let me see if we can find it. Yeah, here we go. He said, I was wondering what was happening in your life when you wrote the song Hungry. He said, he says, I know for me the best songs come when God is doing something in my life. So, do you want to unpack that story?
We had been in Glasgow for 2 years at this point. So I was 23 and we'd moved there, or I had moved up there to get married when I was 21. And Alan and I had this burning desire whenever we were college to church plant. It was just, it's what we knew that we'd been made for.
Yeah.
And Alan being involved in the Vineyard Church, that was my first exposure to it. And I just fell in love with it. It just felt, it really did feel like coming home.
Yeah.
And I loved it. So we went to Glasgow thinking, this is great, we're going to spend the first year of our marriage loving being married and everything's going to be rosy in the garden, and then we'll go off and church plant.
Yeah.
And we planned to go to the west coast of Scotland. That was where we felt that we would be. So we moved to Glasgow, or I moved to Glasgow, we got married. And just before we got married, the church that was Alan's church basically started to fall apart. The pastor in the church had to step down from leadership because of a moral issue, which actually got resolved in the end, and it's been a wonderful story of restoration. But at the time it just felt like all hell had broken loose. And I think the church was up to about 80 people. It wasn't the easiest of planting situations because most of the people who had become Christians and who were in the church were ex-drug addicts or dealers.
Right. Well,
pretty much.
yeah.
And so, like, if you'd had a bad week, this is no word of a lie, if they'd had a bad week, they maybe shot somebody that week. It was just bonkers. But I really loved it too, you know, and they were a great bunch of people.
Yeah.
But whenever this blew up, Alan and I were asked if we would become assistant pastors. And I think it was about 3 months before we got married. And I was 21. It's not a bit of wonder people were looking at us thinking, what did you pick them for? Do you know what I mean? But it was just a nightmare. It was a nightmare. And for 2 years, it was pretty much a nightmare. The church hemorrhaged people, but they didn't just go. They went very loudly.
Yeah.
And I can totally understand why, but it was just a horrible, horrible time. It really was. So we spent a lot of our time in those, especially in the first year of being married, just meeting up with people who were really angry with God, really angry with us. Do you know, just really angry.
See?
I'm not very good with really angry. We just make a lot of dinner and pray for it to all be over. But the Lord really, really protected us through it. He really did. But towards the end of that 2 years, we were just really pretty broken. And all the dream of going and church planting on the west coast of Scotland was right out the window because we needed to stay and help this church survive, really. But you weren't, you know the way John Wimber used to say all the time that volunteering to be a leader is like volunteering to be ugly. Glasgow was very good. Yeah, it was a really good one to show that to be true. So it was right at the end of that time, we were really starting to struggle with, even to be honest, depression and all sorts of things. It was just so hard. And we got to the end of that time, and I remember sitting down on the end of our bed one day, and the first line just came to me, hungry I come to you, because I know you satisfy. And I thought, and honestly I was saying it as a, God, you have got to rescue us prayer. And it was from a real 2-year hell experience. We have got to get out of here type of prayer. And I thought, that sounds kind of lyrical. And the rest of the verse just sort of came very quickly.